How's it going, guys? JP back at you once again, bringing you guys another mixed martial arts related video. This time we're going to be doing the preview / predictions for UFC on Fox number 15, Lyoto the Dragon Machida facing Luke Rockhold. This is a really stacked free TV card. It's one of the better free TV cards we've seen in a while. I always get really excited for these Fox shows. There's just something big about them. So I'm super excited. We're going to break down the entire card from top to bottom. It's pretty stacked. We have the bout listings here, which I normally don't do. It makes it a little bit easier for me now. So yeah, let's start at the very bottom of the card, the first preliminary card, which is the Fight Pass card. We have Eddie the Truck Gordon taking on Chris Dempsey. Gordon is 7-2 and Chris Dempsey is 10-2. So Eddie Gordon is one of the fighters who won TUF 19 against Diego Lima. He kind of overwhelmed him, got the TKO. He looked good in that fight. He then went on to fight Josh Saman, who he looked good against early on. He was winning the fight, and then he got head kicked by Josh, and it kind of was pretty brutal. So it'll be interesting to see how he bounced back against such a devastating loss, you know, a knockout like that. He has a pretty young mixed martial arts career. He is 31 years old, but you know, he hasn't been fighting that long. He hasn't been doing the MMA thing for that long. He does train out of Serra-Longo, and you know, Serra-Longo is a great camp. You know, Matt Serra, Ray Longo, they're really doing a great job crafting these young up-and-coming fighters. Ali Quinta, you know, is one of their more popular fighters who's, you know, really done pretty well in his UFC career so far. Also, they trained the champion Chris Weidman, who is, you know, one of the better fighters right now, one of the better champions. Just a great cornerman, great camp altogether. So I'm usually pretty high on the guys that come out of that camp. And Eddie Gordon is a fighter who I think has a decent amount of potential, but I'm not sure how he's going to bounce back from that loss. You know, he just made a couple mistakes, got over aggressive and got KO'd. So if he can realize what mistakes he made and not be too rattled coming into this bout, I think he will beat Chris Dempsey. Chris Dempsey is a fighter who was on an 8-fight win streak before he got to the UFC. His debut, he fought Yair Latifi, got KO'd. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen with him. He is dropping down from light heavyweight, I believe. And normally, you know, that could factor in a bigger guy coming down. But Eddie Gordon's a pretty big guy himself, so I don't think he'll have trouble with the size. I wouldn't be surprised if both of these fighters are around the same size. Eddie Gordon, I do think, will make the adjustments from his previous bout and win this one. So I'm going to go with Eddie Gordon by decision. Then we have featherweights Diego Brandao, who is 18-10, fighting Jimy Hettes, who is 11-2. Diego Brandao, of course, won the TUF 14 by beating Dennis Bermudez, who went on to do pretty big things in the featherweight division. I think that Dennis Bermudez is going to be a pretty solid fighter coming up. He has had a few setbacks, but we're talking about Diego Brandao right now. So he has lost to Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. He's on a 2-fight skid right now. Diego Brandao is one of those fighters who has kind of been known to gas late in the fight and make a lot of mistakes. Not very good defensively. At first I thought he was going to, you know, make a lot of noise at featherweight when he won the Ultimate Fighter, and since then he's kind of, you know, did good, was on a little streak there and then got caught up. Not really, I don't really believe in Diego Brandao. I don't feel like he has all of the tools to put everything together. I mean, he has the tools, he has punching power and things like that, but his cardio's weak. I just don't feel like he's one of those fighters that is going to put it all together and make it work. Jimy Hettes, on the other hand, has beat Nam Phan and Alex Caceres. When he beat Nam Phan, I think a lot of people were high on him until we kind of realized that that was kind of the end of Nam Phan. Alex Caceres is a guy that I'm really high on. He is one of those fighters that consistently make mistakes and kind of give fights away. But you know, Diego Brandao, that was, or Jimy Hettes, those were big wins. He subbed Alex Caceres. Then he lost to Marcus Brimage and Dennis Bermudez in his last fight. I'm not really sure who I'm going to go with on this one. I think that Diego Brandao does have the power to end the fight, but I feel like he's kind of mentally weak in the UFC, and I'm not sure he's going to put it together. I think I'm going to go with Jimy Hettes on this one, maybe by some sort of decision, I guess. Yeah, I'll go decision, maybe a sub. After that, we have welterweights George Sullivan, who is 16-3, fighting Tim the Dirty Bird Means, who is 23-6-1. This fight, I don't really know much about either of these guys. George Sullivan is on an 8-fight is on an 8-fight win streak, and his last 2 were in the UFC against fighters without Wikipedia pages. So I don't really know much about him. Tim Means lost to Masvidal, Castillo, and Neil Magny, all by decision. His last fight, he beat Diego Lima, who Diego Lima is kind of, I think he's a little overrated. He's not really showed much in the UFC. I believe he's lost his last 2 bouts. He looked good on The Ultimate Fighter. His brother, of course, Douglas Lima, is a good fighter, but I don't think Diego is as good. And I'm not sure about this one, to be honest. I think that I'm gonna go Tim Means. I guess, yeah, I'll go Tim Means. I'm not really sure. This is kind of a pick'em for me because I don't really know much about either of these guys. After that, we move to the second preliminary card, which is actually on Fox, which is pretty cool. So we have 8 bouts in a row that are all going to be on Big Fox. That's awesome. We have bantamweights Takeya Mizugaki, who is 28-2, fighting Aljamain Sterling, who is 10-0. Now Sterling is another fighter out of the Ray Longo, Matt Serra camp. A lot of potential. He's very young. I think he's only 25 years old. He's on a 10-fight win streak. He's 2-0 in the UFC. He's looked really good as of late. High potential. I'm pretty high on this guy, but I did hear a recent interview with him where it didn't seem like his head was fully focused on MMA, which worries me a bit. Now, Takeya Mizugaki, of course, is been around for a long time. He's a veteran. His recent fight he lost and got crushed by Dominic Cruz, but Dominic Cruz is the champion. He's never lost it. He was stripped of the title, but he's never lost the title. It sucks what happened to him with his, another ACL injury or whatever it was. But Takeya Mizugaki, you can't really take nothing away from him from losing to the champion. This is going to be a big test for Aljamain Sterling. I think this is going to really let us know if he's going to be able to fight these high caliber guys at bantamweight or not. But I am going to go with Aljamain. I think Takeya Mizugaki's time is, passing him. And the new breed, Aljamain Sterling, is going to take over. So I'm going to go with Aljamain Sterling by KO round 1. After that, we have light heavyweights Corey Anderson, who is 5-0, fighting Gian Villante, who is 12-5. Gian Villante is one of Chris Weidman's, best friends. He has lost to Ovince Preux and Fabio Maldonado. Corey Anderson won TUF 19, along with his, I think it might have been his teammate, Eddie Gordon. I think both of them were on the same team, I'm not sure. Corey Anderson looked good in his first fight, where he won the title against won the TUF title against Matt Van Buren. And then he beat, I think it was Justin Jones, which I believe is one of Chris Lieben's guys. Wasn't overly impressed in that fight, but I do think this guy has a lot of potential. Light heavyweight really needs contenders. Gian Villante I've never really been sold on, even though he is Chris Weidman's best friend or, really good friend. He's not Chris Weidman. He's not the champion. So, just by association, I don't think that makes him a great fighter. So I'm going to go with the new guy on this one. I'm going to go with Corey Anderson. And I'm going to say decision on that one. Then we move on to light heavyweights, OSP, Ovince St. Preux, who is 17-6, taking on Patrick Cummins, who is 7-1. Now, Patrick Cummins is the guy who came in on really short notice against Daniel Cormier, who is literally one of the best fighters in the world, you know, in the light heavyweight division, you know, definitely top 3 probably. Definitely top 3 probably. Yeah, I would say he's definitely top 3. And he got, you know, blitzed by DC and just, you know, destroyed pretty much. But, you know, you can't really take anything away from him coming in to fight one of the best fighters in the world on short notice. Since then, I believe he's won his last 3 fights. And, you know, he's a decent fighter. He's a great wrestler. He's kind of dominated in the wrestling. OSP, on the other hand, got destroyed by Ryan Bader in terms of just outclassed. Ryan Bader just, you know, took him down for 5 whole rounds practically. OSP was looking better in the late rounds of the fight. Then he went on to knock out Shogun, which I'm not really sure what that does for your career in 2015. What that really says about you. You know, I think I'm gonna go with Patrick Cummins on this one. He is 34 years old, so he doesn't have that big of a window, but I do think he's a pretty solid fighter, and I think he's gonna get it done by decision in this fight. So I'm gonna go Patrick Cummins by decision. Then we move on to the main event of the preliminary cards, and that is lightweights. Jim Miller, who is 24-3, taking on Brunell Dariush, who is 10-1. Actually, Jim Miller is 24-5. Jim Miller is one of those guys who puts streaks together. He's a very good, solid gatekeeper, but every time he gets to the top of the top, he kind of falls. I think that Jim Miller's best times are behind him now. I really don't see him doing much in the lightweight division. Maybe if he would switch weight classes and go down a weight. I don't know if that's possible. It probably is. That might do something for his career, but I really don't see him doing much anymore. And he is a very exciting fighter, and I do like him. His last fight, of course, he lost to Cowboy Cerrone. Cerrone was picking him apart on with the body shots. You know, it eventually hurt him pretty bad and finished him. Now, Brunell Dariush is on a 3-fight win streak since he lost to Ramsey Najim, and he beat Darren Cruikshank in his last fight. And I think, from what I remember, body shots were a factor in that fight. So, based on that, I'm going to go with Brunell Dariush on this one, even though Jim Miller is definitely a fighter who can win against guys who are not at the top of the division. He's a very good fighter. He's a long-time fighter in the UFC. And I wouldn't be surprised if he did win the fight. Then we move on to the main card. We have women's bantamweights. Felice Herrig, who is 10-5, fighting Paige VanZant, who is 4-1. Both of these fighters have a common loss. Paige VanZant's only defeat is to Tecia Torres. And back in Invicta, we seen Tecia Torres beat Felice Herrig in a pretty competitive fight. It was definitely an exciting fight. Felice Herrig is one of those fighters who's a veteran, has fought a lot of good opponents, has beat some, has lost to some, but I feel like she's at her peak, and I really don't feel like she is going to, you know, get any better. Meanwhile, you have Paige VanZant, who's only 21 and has looked increasingly better in every one of her fights. So she has she still has a ways to go in terms of her talent. Felice Herrig usually dominates people who she's more athletic than, but Paige VanZant is very athletic as well. I think I'm going to go with Paige VanZant on this one, simply because I think she has a better skill set, learning experience. Like she's gonna get better and better, and I feel like Felice Herrig is kind of peaked at this point. So I'm gonna go with Paige VanZant. The people who are complaining about this fight being on the main card are ridiculous to me. Both these fighters are very talented, and they're, you know, they're in the top 10, I believe, of their division, or they're top 15 at least. And you know, just a couple more fights and either of these girls can get a title shot. So I don't know what everybody's complaining about. I know that they're blonde and pretty and stuff, but there's been worse fights on the main card of Fox, so I don't, you know, I really don't see the problem. I think people are you know, want to look for a reason to complain about that fight. After that, we have featherweight Cub Swanson, who is 21-6, taking on Max Holloway, who is 12-3. Now, Max Holloway is a fighter who lost to Conor McGregor, and then now he's on a 5-fight win streak since that loss. Cub Swanson is a fighter who was tearing it up in the featherweight division. I thought he was going to get a title shot. He came in against Frankie Edgar, who's literally one of my favorite fighters, and just got exposed, kind of. Frankie Edgar took him down and dominated him, for 4.5 rounds, and then finished him in the 5th with a neck crank. And I'm really interested to see how Cub Swanson bounces back from this, because he does seem like a fighter who's going to learn from that and make his skill set even better. And Max Holloway is another fighter who I think learns very well from his losses. So this is a fantastic fight, potentially fight of the night. Cub Swanson is a high-volume striker. Max Holloway is a high-volume striker. I doubt this fight's going to go to the ground very often. I do think Cub Swanson is the better fighter, so I am going to go with Cub Swanson by KO or TKO. But you never know, because Max Holloway is a damn good fighter as well, and I think he's definitely improved since his Conor McGregor loss. But I'm going to go with Cub Swanson because I do think he's more of an elite fighter. Then we have the co-main event, which is Jacare Souza, who is 21-3, fighting Chris Camozzi, who is 20-9. Now, Jacare is a fighter who has already beat Camozzi. He was supposed to fight... who the hell was he supposed to fight? Yoel Romero, the Soldier God Yoel Romero, which was a very exciting fight. I was really looking forward to that one. Yoel gets injured. Chris Camozzi comes in on short notice. If you flash back to Souza's debut, Chris Camozzi came in on short notice and just got demolished, you know, subbed very quickly. So I don't see why this fight would be any different. Chris Camozzi was on a 4-fight skid after... you know, starting with that loss to Jacare. He got cut from the UFC, went on the regional circuit, put 2 wins together. Yoel Romero gets injured. Chris Camozzi says, "I'll fight him." Nobody else wanted to fight him, so that's how this fight happened. You know, obviously Souza, I don't see why he wouldn't win this fight. Great submission guy. He's on a 7-fight win streak, 4-fight win streak in the UFC. He beat Derek Brunson, Ed Herman, Camozzi, Okami, Francis Carmona, and Mousasi, which in my opinion that Mousasi win was his most impressive out of that streak. He also has a win over Robbie Lawler, the champion. That win was at middleweight, and it was in Strikeforce, but I think that's of note. His last loss was against Luke Rockhold back in Strikeforce. I mean, Souza's legit, and I don't see any reason why he shouldn't destroy Camozzi, but maybe Camozzi will make it a little bit more competitive this fight. I do know that he has signed a multi-fight contract, so even if he loses this fight, he's going to get another shot in the UFC, which I think is well-deserved, because stepping up on such short notice against an elite fighter who's already beaten you after stepping up on short notice is definitely... impressive, maybe a bit stupid as well. Then we move on to the main event. We have Lyoto the Dragon Machida, who is 22-5, taking on Luke Rockhold, who I think is 13-2, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not 100% sure on that one. I forgot to write it down. But Lyoto Machida is a fighter who is very good. I mean, he's beaten some great guys. He's lost to only a couple guys. Since he's been at middleweight, he beat Munoz with the head kick. He beat Mousasi, which was, in my opinion, his most impressive win. I was expecting him to lose that fight. Then he lost to the champion in a very competitive fight. And then he came back and KO'd CB Dalloway. So Machida is a guy who, I believe he's 34 or 36. He's 36 years old right now. And I keep waiting for the wheels to kind of fall off. I'm just every fight, I'm counting Machida out. I'm like, he's getting too old. This is going to be the fight where we see Machida is not getting better. This is his decline. And it never happens. I thought that was going to happen in the CB Holloway fight, and he looked great. So at this point, I don't really want to pick against Machida anymore. Luke Rockhold, his only loss in the UFC was his debut against a TRT to Vitor Belfort. He got a spinning back head kicked. Both of these guys are very good. They're they're distant strikers, and I really don't know who's gonna win this one. I mean, I guess I'm gonna go with Luke Rockhold because I feel like he's the younger fighter. But at the same time, I do this every time with Machida, where I count him out and he impresses. And he's looked great at middleweight. But I am gonna go with Luke Rockhold. I do think that he's going to be able to put it together. It could turn into one of those Machida fights where both guys are kind of standing on the outside, not being aggressive because they're, looking for the counter. I really hope that that is not the case, but this fight needed to be 5 rounds, so we'll hopefully see a clear-cut winner and potentially the next title challenger at middleweight to take on Chris Weidman or Vitor Belfort if he wins. So that is my predictions. This video has went on way too long. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.